Hello and welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to look at a mod from the Maro site here called Pallet Work. You put in your board pallets from the sawmill and then you get out the smaller emptier pallets, which I believe can be then used in certain mods like the greenhouse mods, which require the empty pallets to put on the product that they create. Yeah, there's not really much to sort of say about this from the site itself. I'll put a link in the description. Yeah, it's just this is actually a GE installation only. It's not a placeable. It does require a few different scripts, which we'll get into a little bit. And yeah, so it needs board pallets from the sawmill and diesel, and then you get out the pallets and then wood chips. Yeah, again, really not much to sort of say about it. There's not much of a description there, but that's what it looks like. But we'll see that a bit more in depth once we actually get into Giant Editor. Download link here, so I'm going to close that down. I'll, as I say, put the link in the description later on. I've gone to my starter map here again. We'll just open this up in Giant Editor so you can have a look and see what I've done in here. I've just put in a couple of items that are going to get me what I need. I've just put in the holes hacker, which did a previous video on, just to get me my wood chips as quickly as possible so that I could then get the sawmill up and running. This is a slightly different sawmill than I used in a previous video. This is actually a later version with a few fixes, and it's using the later fabric script. So a couple of bits which have been fixed, possible conflicts and things like that. So yeah, I've got that into there. What I want to do here though is bring in this new or newer mod, or whatever you want to call it, the pallet maker creator thingy. This thing here, Pallet Work, and I don't know. I've gone and downloaded it, as you can see, and I've extracted that. So what I'm going to do is just copy this over. I'm not going to worry about creating folders and things like that for this particular video, but if you wanted to structure it somewhat and keep all your imports into one folder, then you could create a folder called imported or whatever else, and then just put it all into there. But for now, I'm going to cut it and bring it over and paste it into my folder here for my starter map. And we've got some parts in here which we will need to look at. Now there is one thing that I will get into later on. There's a script from here which is actually missing, which we will have a look at when we get to it. But if you have already downloaded this and attempted to put it into a map and then come to the point where it's not doing what it's meant to do and whatever else, that's because that particular script hasn't been provided within this particular download. But it is required to actually get it all up and running. But like I say, I'll get into that in a little bit. Okay, so I'm going to go back into my Giant Editor session here. Just going to go File, Import, and we will go into my starter map here, into the Pallet and Work folder, and make sure you click on the right one, this Pallet and Work, not the actual pallet one, because that's the pallet that's spawned in. So we need to double click this one, which will bring it into the map, and then all I need to do is just find an appropriate place. So we'll just bring it over here. It's fairly biggish sort of building, so you need to obviously give yourself a fair bit of space. So we'll just rotate it around so it's sort of in the right direction here. Now there are some triggers for the doors and things like that, which we'll need to get into for the animations and things like that, but I'll get to that in a little bit. If we have a sort of walk through the wall here, this is what we're going to be looking at. We've got a pallet spawn, and then the sort of conveyor belt type system, or whatever you want to call that, pallet assembler or whatever you call it, which basically rolls your pallet along. So you don't have to pick up each one as it comes out. You can leave it running for a period of time, and it will just keep producing and keep rolling them down until it gets to the end. And then obviously you would need to empty it because it will be full. But it's not like you have to come back every single pallet and then, to keep it running. And this is where we will bring in our board pallets from this sawmill, which will be stacked up over here as we bring them in, and then obviously the machinery will do its thing and give us what we want. And we have a monitor over here which has got our information, a couple of displays. There's one in here, and I think there's one here as well. Yep. And we have our old traditional sort of red, amber and green to display what's going on our thingy there. Okay, so we've got our fuel point around the corner here. so that's fine. Oh, and we have some sort of output here. I'm not sure what that is just yet, but we'll get into that. Probably wood chips, but we'll see what that does later on when we get it all up and running. Okay, so now that I've got this into here, there's a couple of things we want to look at in the scenegraph here. So I'm going to go into the actual mod. So with the main cube here clicked or highlighted, we can see we've got our script, which is the fabric script, so that's fine. Now I'm already using the fabric script anyway, because I've got these two particular products in, the holes hacker and the actual sawmill, the Saga Works, however you want to pronounce that, and that requires the actual fabric script. Now the fabric script that comes with this pallet and work thingy over here is somewhat older than this version of the sawmill, the fabric, which you can see here. I would always recommend, if you can, use the later version of any particular script. If you find that it causes you conflicts on your map, then you may need to revert back to a previous version, but chances are, I would imagine, these script writers, they've upgraded the script itself for a particular reason. Perhaps previous versions of the script didn't allow for something or cause conflicts, so they've rewritten it to overcome that issue. So where you can, as I say, I would always try to use the later version of that script where possible. Yeah, I've just basically chosen that one because it is the later one. So and I've managed to get it from that particular mod, and I require that mod to get all this working, so it just seemed to make sense. Anyway, okay, so I've put in some trees, obviously, so I can cut them down and get all this up and running in the actual game save that I've got already. I've cut down a couple of trees, made my wood chips to then put into the sawmill here, because it requires wood chips to obviously get it running, plus some logs around the back here. So I've got this up and running. I've collected a couple of the pallet boards ready to go into the actual pallet creation thingamajigger over here once we get that up and running, just to save a little bit of time. So now with that there, I'm going to basically come over into the scenegraph again. If we click on the plus symbol, we can see we've got our inputs and outputs. We have a look in there. Our input one is wood chips, which is our board pallet, which will come from our sawmill. Then we've also got a second input, which is our fuel. So as I said, we need to put some fuel in it, diesel fuel, to get it up and running. Then we've got a couple of outputs. So our first one is the actual pallet, which has a new fill type, empty pallet, not wood chips. So we will need to look into how we go about registering that new fill type within the system, within the game, so it understands what it is. Otherwise this particular mod will not run. Normally I'd expect to come in like the sawmill, and also with the actual holes hacker, the wood chip creator over here, I would have expected to see a fill type there of wood chips, but in this particular case it's something different. Again, like I said at the beginning of the video, I believe that's possibly because this will create what you require for further mods like the greenhouse mods, which require empty pallets to obviously put their product onto. So we will need to register that new fill type to get that working, otherwise it will be useless, because when we then take it over to perhaps maybe the greenhouses or whatever mod may require the pallets, it won't accept them because it won't see the correct fill type, because it will be looking for a fill type of empty pallet, and we won't have that, so we need to work with that. Okay, so that's that one. Then the product one here is wood chips, so it is wood chips, so we get a byproduct here again of wood chips, which is, you know, pretty much standard for this sort of setup, because, you know, the actual sawmill here, it requires wood chips to run as it is, downloaded from Mara. I have seen a few different models of this which have been changed slightly to accept diesel fuel, not wood chips, or I think this also takes straw as well to get it up and running, but people have modified it so that it requires actual diesel fuel, and then it has a generator or whatever else. But in this particular case, as it comes standard, it requires wood chips. So, but it also produces wood chips as a byproduct, the same as this particular unit does. So you could always say that they are somewhat good lord, I can't speak, self-contained, if you like. They will run on their own byproducts. So once you've actually created your board pallets and it's given you a byproduct of wood chips, you can then take those wood chips, put them back into the unit, and it will then continue to run. Again, with this particular unit, if you were getting short on wood chips, you could take them from here and then put them back into the sawmill to keep the process all going. The only thing you would have to do with the pallet creator machine over here is to just put diesel fuel in. But you know, if we have a byproduct that keeps everything running, then it's self-contained sort of thing, and yeah, it doesn't cost us quite so much money within games, so that's quite nice. For me, I like that idea anyway, at least. It's not to everybody's liking, but I tend to find that that's quite beneficial. Anyway, let's move on. So we've got that. We've got our player trigger, which is basically our trigger that we will enter to get our information from in the F1 menu, to see what we require and what we're producing, all the rest of it. We've got some work animations now. In this particular case, the work animations, when you actually look in the folder for the work animations, if we open this up, we've got one here for forage, and we've also got another one for smoke. Well, the smoke one is not required because this particular mod has been created with a smoke particle system emitter, so it also automatically gives us smoke whether it's running or not. Doesn't really matter. Whereas with the actual sawmill, and I believe with the holes hacker, the smoke only appears once it's actually running and whatever else. The forage one there, you can see there is in the user attributes a particle system file name and a path file name. Well, if we actually look in there in the folder structure, so if I actually go into, we haven't got that particular folder structure because obviously I've taken it from somewhere else, but from the actual download site, but that path file name doesn't exist. But if we go into the actual mod itself, we've got a folder called PS. Well, if we open that, there's nothing in it. There's no i3ds, which this would require an i3d to actually display something. So you're probably going to find you're not going to get any kind of particle animations or anything coming off of this, from what I can understand. If I actually click on that, the actual point where it shows is within the bunker, if you like, this particular setup. So I will have to see how that plays out in game. You may want to adapt that and change that slightly. Perhaps maybe go into your sawmill, your fabric script here, or your fabric your unit, and go into the work animations there. We've got some bits in here. So we've got a wood chips one, and we've also got a smoke one. So you could possibly copy those and then bring them over into this particle system setup to give yourself some proper animations. But I'm not going to get into that in this particular video. I'll leave you to experiment around with that, or just leave it be. You know, if it works, then and it doesn't bother you too much, then chances are just go with it. Sounds will be automatically set up because we've imported the mod. It will automatically create our path file name for us, so don't need to worry about that. And then we've got some shaders for lights and things like that, so that's fine. And then we've got some other parts down here for our clear areas, which are part of the mod itself. Don't need to worry about that. And then there's some ground markers. That's fine. They're just cosmetic stuff. And then we've got our actual triggers for our doors, and this is what we will need to look at to bring over a certain XML and some other parts here. I may leave the XML where it is and change the path file name. Not sure yet. And the reason why I say that is because when this is actually sample mod map, but if you're working on a map or trying to import this perhaps maybe into a map that has already been created and up and running, and you've actually put some animated objects and things like that, gates, doors, whatever, you may then get a conflict because this particular XML, animated objects.xml, will possibly be named the same as any other animated objects.xml that you already have on the map. Now this particular map, because it's a start map, doesn't have any animated objects on it at all. It's got nothing, so I can use it and put it wherever I want. But if you already had some sort of animated objects, then it could get a little bit weird and possibly conflict. But we'll have a look at that XML a bit later on and talk about that a bit more. So we've got that, and then we've also got our second door here. And again, we have our XML and our script and whatever else, but we'll look at that again, as I say, in a little bit. And we've got our wood pallet and sampler, which is basically this sort of conveyor belt system here, whatever you want to call it, rollers, where the pallets are spawned in and then rolled down here. As we produce more and more, they will then get pushed down further and further, so we don't have to keep coming in here to get the single pallet that's spawned in, which is quite nice. same as the wool palette sort of setup on various different maps from FS17 and including FS17. And then we've also got here some light switches and things like that, so we can come in and turn some lights on if we want to. One in this particular building, then we have another one over here as well, and the lights are obviously up in the roof there, so we wouldn't necessarily need to be working in the dark. So yeah, there we go, all these bits and pieces within the actual mod itself. We will need to have a look into the actual pallets, because in here we have a pallet spawner, so we need to find where that is and then create our path file name to point towards it. Now, what I would probably say here in this particular case, because we're sort of getting into 1, 2, 3 mods, we could potentially have 4, 5, 6, 7. The list of mods could be endless, and what you may find that what I've suggested in previous videos is to take our bits and pieces and put into one folder. You might find that that could possibly start causing conflicts. So what I have suggested in the past is to create a new folder out here with some bits and pieces and call it whatever you want, PS, or perhaps maybe objects or something like that, and then put everything in that one folder. That may not potentially work. The more mods that you get into the map using particle systems and things like that, it may then cause conflicts. So what I would probably suggest here, the best option is to change your path file name to point towards the actual folder that you've brought over, and then into there with the particle systems as they are listed within. So it just keeps everything somewhat separated and will reduce the amount of conflicts. Also, for that matter, what you might find in here, for example, what we might find here is called sawmitter.i3d. For the Sigger work or the sawmill, that is perfectly fine, and it's shaded and got all the particle DDS files and everything else in a particular manner to make the sawmill work as it's intended. But you may then bring in another mod which has also got the same sawmill.i3d emitter, but the actual particle DDS files are different, and if you were to then put them all in one folder, it would overwrite them. And then what you might find is it will work for one mod, but the actual particles that are coming out of another mod would look wrong or different, or just wouldn't work at all. So I would probably say here what I'm going to do is to keep them where they are in their folder structure, and then put my path file name, or point my path file name towards each individual folder. It does take a little bit longer, and obviously your path file name will be longer, which, you know, it is what it is. But I think in this particular case, again, the more mods we are adding into each map, I think will be beneficial to do it that way. But again, that's something you need to experiment with and choose a method that works best for you. I'm just going to pause here a second and grab a drink. I'll be back in a little bit. So what we're going to do here is we're going to have a look at the actual pallet.i3d. I need to find that and then change my path file name to that particular i3d. So if I go back into my folder structure here, we go into the pallet and work folder here, and we've also got now our pallet.i3d, which is what we saw earlier on, and I said to make sure we choose the correct one when we're actually importing the actual mod itself, this main unit, into the map, because obviously you don't want to be importing the pallet into just the pallet on the map, because that wouldn't be much use. But we do need to point our path file name towards this particular i3d so that it spawns in and everything else. So we've already got our maps and then our pallet.i3d. So what I need to do here is just basically put in this pallet and work name. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to highlight it there and copy it with Control-C, and I'm going to come over here and just paste it in and then put my / like so, and tab across so that it actually accepts the change. I could just come back in here and just make sure it is correct. So we've got maps, pallet and work, pallet.i3d, so that's fine. That should be no problem whatsoever. So it's not too big deal, but the more folder structure you incorporate, so like I said before, if we actually create a new folder and called it imported or objects, then that path file name would become maps objects or maps imported or whatever else, and then pallet work and whatever, and then so on and so on. So, you know, there is that to just consider when you actually do bring in the mods and how you're going to structure your folders and everything else, because then your pathfinding will get longer and longer than the deeper you bury it within your folder structure. But anyway, okay, so we've got that. We've already shown, or I've already shown you that in this particular case, the particle systems, the work animations, are pretty much null and void because they don't exist within the mod, or at least I haven't been able to find them. So that's something we will need to look into to see if that is going to cause us any errors later on. It may not even function, so I might need to have a play around with that. Hopefully it will, but we'll see what we can come up with later on when we get to that point. Okay, so there's nothing further there really I need to do. We've got everything else. The only thing I want to do here now is just have a look at the actual maps animated objects. So if we come back into the folder structure here and we come back into the Pallet and Work folder, I may possibly, if I'd have thought about it, I might have actually renamed this folder so I can actually say it without sounding completely stupid all every time. But because I don't speak the language that it was probably written in to start with, but never mind, didn't think of that at the time and I forgot, so we'll go with Pallet and Work, that's fine. But you may want to rename the folder to something that's preferable to yourself, so you can actually pronounce it in your own language, whatever that may be. Right, so what I need to do now is actually look at the animated objects.xml, which I spoke about earlier on, which is to do with our doors and where we're going to put that and whatever else. Now, like I said, for me, I haven't got one on this particular map because it's a starter map. There are no animated objects, but if I was potentially building a map, I would probably want to put some animated doors and gates and things like that. So then this could possibly cause a conflict if I was to name it the same as this one. I could always rename this particular XML if I wanted to, so I could rename this to Pallet and Work animated objects.xml if I wanted to, or whatever else. But for now, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to leave it where it is, and I'm going to then change my path file name to point to it within this particular folder. So again, what I need to do is highlight the Pallet and Work text and copy that, and then just come over into the path file name here, paste that in, create my / just to finish it off, and then tab across. So we've now got our folder structure on our path file name, which is maps, Pallet and Work, and then animated objects. So if we check that, we've got maps, come back, maps, maps, Pallet and Work, and then our animated objects.xml. So that path file name is perfectly fine there. Okay. So we've got what we need in that particular section. So I just need to basically do the same here. So what I can do is just come into this one now and copy the text from there, and then just come over and basically paste it in like so. So now we've got our correct path file name for our animated objects.xml in both of the for both of the doors, the door triggers. So there should be no issues there. The door should work perfectly fine. Okay, so I think we're pretty much done within the actual map here. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to go ahead and save that, and then we'll exit out, get back on the desktop, and we'll have a look at some bits and pieces there. So if I come into this, what we will do here is just have a quick look in the actual animated objects.xml, just so you can see what that's all about. Won't go too much into this, but we can see we've got our indexes and our bits and pieces. This one is at the top is for a light switch by the looks of things. So that will actually toggle our light switch on and off depending on whether we click our left mouse button or right mouse button or whatever else. And then we've got another one there for a switch, light switch. Then we've got our doors. So we can see here we've got negative text, open door, and then we've got positive text. So I'd probably say there that you press your left mouse button to open it and right mouse button to close it again. They've got some door sounds and things like that and bits and pieces there. So that's fine. We don't really need to get too much into that. We can actually have a look, and from what I can see there, that's also something else that's been missed and left out, because if we just quickly pop back in, you can see that we've actually got some path file names here for maps sounds, and then we've got the actual WAV sound, but they haven't included the actual sounds within this download. So it would only be those sounds would only be relevant if you actually had them. Again, because this is a starter map, I don't have any of those sounds. So if you did want sounds on the doors, then you would need to locate some and then apply them to that particular path file name for that XML, and then set that all up. But I'm not particularly too fussed. Again, in this particular video, I'm not going to go down that road, so we'll just go with whatever it's going to do. Hopefully, going to get it running first, and then we can worry about sounds later on. But I'm probably not going to do that. But I'll let you experiment with the sounds and see how you can get on with that for yourselves. So if it really bothers you that much, right. So what we need to do now is actually look at some other parts, because we need to bring over some bits and pieces into my modDesc to get that all working. Now we've got a text document here, so what I'm going to do is open that up in Notepad++, and we can see here we've got an additional map type set up, which gives me the indication that we actually require the additional map type script to make all this work. Now, from what I can work out, and I have worked with the additional map type script a few times, so I can look at this and see that this is actually for an older version of the script, because the newer version doesn't have the map material directory set up. It now has bales, so it still has the fruit HUDs and the ground tip directory, but it doesn't have this part at the end. It now has been replaced by bales. To bring in some different types of bales, the oat bale and I think the rye bale and things like that. So we may need to experiment a little bit here and just see if we can run it with the later script. Now, this is another thing when it comes to scripts. Going back to what I said at the beginning of the video, it is always best, if you can, to use the later version of any particular script. Unless you come across conflicts, then you may need to go back to a previous version. But for the most part, I would always say to use a later version, the latest version of a script. Now, because this has been set up for an older version, possibly, I would probably say something like version 1.0.0.4 or something like that. Because if I come back into here, I've actually now got 1.0.0.8, as you can see here. So it's more than likely going to be for an older version of that script. So if I was to be interested in creating a map, and I was then going to put on additional map type script, so I could add in additional fruit types like oat, rye, sorghum, possibly sand and millet and things like that, I would always want to use the latest script. But in this particular case, I'm going to be using text. For this mod to work, I would be using text that would only apply to the older version of that script. So that would be a conflict. It would be of no use to me, because it would force me to use an older version of the script to then work with my additional fruit types, my millet and so on. So I'm going to have a bit of a play around here, and we'll just see what we can do with this so that I can actually use the later version of the script. So we'll get to that shortly. But what I'm going to do first of all is just bring over my L10N section here. So we've got some text. Now, if you don't have an L10N section, so we've got an L10N tag at the top here, and we've got one at the bottom. Now, if you're working with a starter map that has nothing on it whatsoever, now I am working with a starter map, but I've already brought in the as I say, the sawmill and the holes hacker, the wood chipper creator thingy. So I've brought in some scripts, and I've already edited my modDesc. So I've got some L10N sections, but when I first actually started working with this particular map today, it didn't have those, so I had to bring them in and create them. But so if you haven't got them, then you would need to copy all of this text. But if you have got them, then you would only need to bring in just this part. So because we've got some extra source files and some input bindings and things like that, but I've already got extra source files and input bindings again, so I wouldn't require the actual tags, these parts. Those ones there for the input bindings, and that one there for the extra source files, and again for our L10N section. So I'm going to just go ahead and copy this part between the L10N tags, and then I'm going to come over. What we don't want to have here is duplicates, so what I will do here is I'm going to come in and I'm going to create a couple of lines and then paste it in. And oops, that's not what I wanted to do. That's also not what I wanted to do. Let's do that again. So we'll go Control C to copy that, come over, and we will paste it in. There we go, that worked that time. So now what we need to do is just check that we haven't already got this information in here already. We don't want it in here twice because it can cause duplication errors. So doesn't look like we already have that, so we'll just tidy that up a little bit. There we go, so it all lines up a little bit better. So it looks like that is the first reference to that text, so that's okay. So we can leave that, that's fine. So now we can look at our extra source files. I already have the fabric script because again I'm using the sawmill and whatever else, so I've already got that set up, so I don't need to worry about that one. But what I do need to worry about, or what I do need to copy over, is the Pallet and Sammler. So I'm going to go ahead and highlight that line, copy it, and then I'm going to come over, create my new line and paste it in. And we've got, so that's actually set up for the correct path file name. What I do need to do is actually bring it over into my scripts folder because I haven't got it in here at the moment. So if I go back into my maps, palette and work, scripts, and I can then choose that one. I'm going to copy it, I'm going to leave it where it is, but I'm going to copy it and then bring it back to my scripts folder and paste it in. Now you could do the same. If you haven't got a scripts folder, then create it and then put your scripts all together in one place. Scripts aren't so important because you would only ever have one of the actual type of scripts, so you wouldn't have two fabric scripts, you wouldn't have two additional trigger scripts because they would cause conflicts, so you'd only have ever one of whatever script it might be. So for this particular case it's perfectly fine to have one folder called scripts or whatever you want to call it, and then just chuck them all in that same folder, that's no problem. And then just set your path file name up accordingly. But if you didn't want to do that, then you could always just change the path file name here in your modDesc. So in this particular case for the Pallet and Sammler thingy, I could go into maps and then into the palette and work and then scripts and then change my path file name accordingly to point to that folder and that particular script. Again, however you want to do that and whatever works best for you. This works best for me, so I'm going to go with that. Okay, so now that I've got that set up, let's just have a look, see if there's anything else. So we've got our input bindings. So again, I've already got some input bindings down the bottom here for a light switch. So I can look at that. I've got light switch, click FS for the Sega work for this sawmill. So chances are that's not going to be the same as any of these, which is not. So I'm going to go ahead and highlight all of those and copy it, bring it over. I'm going to create a new line and then just paste it in like so. So that's perfectly fine. We've got everything in there that we need now into our modDesc, taken from the actual setup here, apart from our additional map types. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go ahead and save that, and then I'm going to close that down in modDesc for the next. Okay, so we've got our bits at the top here to do with our additional map types. So we've got our HUD directory and tip on ground and everything else, but because I want to work with the later version of the actual script, which this I believe has been set up for an older version because it no longer has the map material directories and all that sort of stuff. So if I actually look, I've got a later version here which is version 1.0.0.8, and we can see in here that it actually shows us in our additional map types HUD directories, ground tip directory and bale types directory, which is a little bit different to what we've got over here. So if I was working with the older version of the script, then this potentially would work perfectly fine. But I don't particularly want conflicts later on, because if I was to be using this on a map that had additional fruit types on it, using the later version of the additional map type script, then this could possibly cause conflicts. Or if I was potentially building a map, then I would always want to use the later version of the script. So again, conflicts could possibly come to light. So what I'm going to try and do here is have a bit of a play and see if I can work out how to set this up so that it's not actually in this particular context. I want to change this so that it will hopefully work with the later version of the script. So what I'm going to do is actually take the line of text here for sand, because that's also a fill type, which is what this is, a fill type, not a fruit type. So I'm going to copy the text there like so. I'm going to bring it over into the text document just so it's all together and paste it in. What I also want to do is bring over this particular line of text here. So I'm going to copy that and bring that over as well. So we'll put that under there like so. If I just tidy up the text a little bit so we can actually see what we're looking at. There we go. So hopefully we can, what I'll also do is here I'm going to change the text. So I'm going to change the language over to XML so it gives all our pretty colours so we can pick out parts somewhat easier, so it's not just all black and white. So if I just bring that over as well. So we can see, as I say, the older version is fruit HUDs, tip on ground, map holders, and then it has map holders false, but this is saying in our later version fruit HUDs, tip on ground and bale types, which is the newer version. So I need to basically go with the newer version, so I want to keep this. So what I'm going to do is create a couple of lines there to separate it, so I know I'm working with the newer version, because what I want to do is adjust this so I can then just copy it straight over into my modDesc. Okay, so we've got our empty pallets, so this matches up with our sand so far. So we've got our price per litre show on table, then we've got mass per litre and litres per second, which is not quite the same, so I'm not quite sure, but we've got mass per litre there, so we could go with that. As group unknown, group bulk. See, this is somewhat different because it's saying here has group bulk true, but now it's been changed to field type categories, so we need to be a bit careful there. So what I'm going to do, I'm actually going to copy the text for the empty palette and I'm going to overwrite the sand like so, and then what I will do is just separate them slightly so I don't get them too confused, because this is the older version at the top and then we've got our newer version at the bottom. So so let's say I'm going to keep that, I think. But what I'm going to do here is I'm going to change some parts because I don't want it to be on a train wagon or an auger wagon, so I'm going to delete that. What I do want to do is have it so that it can be recognised by a pallet fork, so type in fork, has materials true, has particles true, use heap true. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to now delete that one. We'll delete that line as well if we can, so it all comes up together. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to copy that like it is. So if I copy that, I'm going to open up the modDesc for my map. Oops. And I'm then going to paste that in. So we'll come down, create a couple new lines, and we'll paste that in. So hopefully that should, if all is working okay, that should recognise now and register empty pallet as a fill type with a price per litre. We don't want it on the actual price table, so we will change that to false. I think I'm going to go with that and see if that works. Hopefully it will. If it doesn't, then I'll need to adjust it a little bit further, but hopefully that will work. So we'll go with that for now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to close that down. Don't want to save it. I'm going to close that down. So we've actually got our modDesc for our map here. So that's fine. So we can go ahead and save that. And then what I need to do is actually bring over the additional map type script. So if we go in our scripts folder, and I've got my version 1.0.8 script. Oops. So I'm going to go ahead and copy that into my map like so. What I also need to do is actually bring over into this particular map the fruit HUDs and the tip on ground. Now the fruit HUDs will have probably a lot more in it than I need, or not that folder, sorry. What I need to do is go into the palette and folder. So if we come back into here, the palette and work folder, so go into here, we've got fruit HUDs and tip on ground. The fruit HUDs will have our empty palette DDS, so this will be what is shown up in our info panel down in the bottom right hand corner when we collect it with our palette forks. Then we've got our tip on ground, which gives us our empty palette setup. So we need to basically choose that folder and that folder, copy those, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to put those in here like so. And the reason why I'm going to put them there is because in our modDesc it's actually giving us our path file name HUDs directory, which is fruit HUDs, and ground tip directory, which is tip on ground. I'm not going to worry about the bales one. And the reason why I'm going to be putting it like that is because, again, if I'm going to be working with further additional fruit types like millet and so on, this is exactly where I would have those folders in this folder structure where my modDesc is. So I don't want to have any conflicts again there, because I couldn't have two separate path file names within the actual additional maps section of the modDesc. So I will need to keep them in that particular folder structure with that path file name. Otherwise any additional fruit types would get confused, because I would have multiple fruit HUDs folders and multiple tip on ground folders and so on and so on. So hopefully that will work, and it will register that empty pallet, and we should be pretty good, I think. Right, so the last thing we need to do here before we actually get into game is we need to change our, or add in our path file name to our script. If we go into our scripts folder here, we've now brought over the additional map types Lua script. So I need to make a path file name there in the modDesc, obviously to point to that script, otherwise it won't run. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to basically copy one that's already here, like so, and I'll create a new line, and I'm just going to paste that in. And then what I can do here is I'm just going to go into here and I'm just going to highlight the actual text and then copy that, and then I can just come back in here and overwrite that one like so. So now that path file name is pointing towards my scripts folder and the additional map types Lua script. So if everything is okay, I can go ahead and save that now. I'm just going to make sure that I've got the correct text in here, because I think... Right, so I'm going to just do one more thing here, because if I come back into the actual map itself, open this up in Giant Search, and it's really important that you actually look at the text and everything else and what it's called and all the rest of it, because if you don't, it will actually not display what you require. So if we come into here, we can look at our output triggers. We've got the name, which is pallet, and then obviously empty pallet. We've also got wood chips, but in my modDesc I haven't got any text there which is referring to my pallets. So what I need to do is take the name, but what I need to do first of all is obviously copy a line. So doesn't really matter if we choose this one, that's fine. So just take that one, I'm going to create a new line like so, and then I'm going to take the text here pallet from the name in the user attributes, and I'm going to overwrite that in there. So I'm going to paste that in, and then I'm going to come back in here and I'm going to take the empty pallet, and then I'm going to paste that in over the products like so. So now that should display correctly. So when it looks at the name in game and sees pallet, what we'll actually get on screen is empty pallet in our info panel. So if you don't put that in, you won't get the correct text, or if any, it won't display any text, or it will stop the mod from working altogether. So it's really important that you get all that correct. So our inputs are fine, excuse me, because we've got boardwood, which I think we've already got in here. Boardwood, so we've got that. I'm just going to clear my throat just one moment. Sorry about that. So we've got our boardwood, so that's fine. And we've got our diesel fuel, so just check that. Have we got diesel and fuel? No, we have not, so we need to put that in as well. So let's create another line. So again, we'll copy this one, that's fine. And we'll create another line and paste that in. So then we will take diesel as the name and paste that there, and then we've got our fuel, so we'll copy that and then we'll just paste over that like so. Okay, excellent. Now obviously we've got our Brennstoff or whatever for fuels, but it won't see that in this particular mod. It's looking for that name and then requiring that text to be displayed. So it's not classed as a duplication in that effect, because there are two different actual names. So that's fine. So we should be okay now. So let's close all that down. We'll close that down. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go into game and we will have a look and see if we can actually get this up and running. So I'll see you in a little bit when we get into game. Okay, so here we are now in game, and as I said before earlier on in the video, the smoke you can see there from the stack is just a particle emitter, so it basically shows there whether the mod is actually running or not. Before we actually jump into the mod itself, what I want to do is just jump into my pickup here, and I'm just going to drive around and show you the rest of what we've got set up here. I mean, we've looked at it in massPerLiter, but I just want to show you that there are no conflicts between any of the other mods. But our sawmill here is all working perfectly fine, no problems there, no conflicts. If we come over to the holes hacker here, the actual wood chipper thingamajigger, we jump out here and have a look, we can also see that we've got our smoke particles and everything there is working perfectly fine as well, so there are no conflicts there. It's always worth just checking other mods that you may already have on a map, or other mods that you are importing at the same time, or ones that you're adding at a later date or whatever, against the scripts that you're now going to be using. Again, coming back to what I said earlier on in the video, it's always my preference to use the latest script that is available if I can, but it's sometimes necessary to revert back to a previous version if there are conflicts, or wait until a newer version comes available if you particularly want a mod that you just can't get working with any of the scripts that are available at that time. So let's just jump straight in here. I've also put down a fuel tank, which is actually a placeable version, but I've brought it into massPerLiter so we can get some fuel to get this up and running. And as I said previously, I've also created a few pallets of the boards pallets from the sawmill, just to save a little bit of time so we don't have to wait for those to be created. So we'll just come over to the mod itself now, and I'll bring up the F1 menu. We do have a relatively large trigger here that we can come into to open our door, so we'll press our left mouse button to open the door, right mouse button to close. We do have to keep the button pressed down. If I actually just tap the button, the door will only open gradually, so we do have to keep the button pressed to open it fully or whatever else. We've got a place here that we'll put our boards pallets into, which will then give us one of our inputs. That's fine. If we come over with our F1 menu open, we can come over to our monitor and we can see we do actually get some information, so that's really fantastic. That's a good sign that we have achieved something, at least something is working so far. We can see in our products we have our wood chips, and we now have our newly created field type, which is the empty pallet. So fantastic. So far we're really getting somewhere. We'll just come down to the other part of the mod itself, and again we have a relatively large trigger so we can open our doors, same as we did with the other one. And we have our pallet sampler, the actual roller plate thing here, which our pallets will roll down, so we don't have to continually come in and empty them one at a time. We can get quite a collection going, and we can then take them from there, store them in this large area over here if we so choose to, or whatever else. We have a display up here and our red, amber, green setup, which I think is some sort of a way bridge setup within this pallet sampler thingy, which is why it's changing color, but that's fine. We'll get to that when we get to it, hopefully shortly, when this all comes up and running. So what I will do, first of all, I've got my little skid steer here, so I'm just going to start this up and we'll run this in and put some of the boards pallets in. Now if you look down in the right hand corner, you can see here we've got a HUD type of wood chips, because that is what the boards pallets are designated as a field type. They are designated as wood chips. So if we come into here, excellent, it's taken our boards pallets and it's stacked them over in the corner here. Fantastic. So what we'll do is we'll go and grab another one. I'll just shut down the F1 menu so I can see what I'm doing a bit easier. So if we come over and get another one, I can't do this in cab, I'm afraid, so you just have to bear with it out of cab. So if we come around now, I just don't have any depth perception in cab, so I just can't see where the forks are going into the actual pallet there, but that's fine. Okay, so if we just run this one over, we'll just do this, we won't put the other one in as well, just this one, so it's got plenty in there. Now I don't know what the ratio is, so you will have to play around with this. I don't know what the ratio is from boards pallets to actual pallets. Whether it's cost effective or not a clue. Like I said before, this may be something that is required if you have the greenhouse set up. Some of the greenhouses require a certain board pallet or empty pallet so that you can put the product onto. So it may be a case of whether it's a profit or not, you know, you just have to go with it if you so choose to use those particular mods. So let's come over to this now, and we'll grab our tractor and we'll get some fuel into the unit as well, and fingers crossed we should now, well not just now but in a minute or two, once I've put the fuel in, have this all kicked into gear and start creating some pallets. So I'll just come over to here and hopefully get some sort of a tip trigger. Don't know how big the trigger is, but there we go. So we do need to use the Coat Universal setup or a particular tanker that has a tip trigger that gives us this particular icon, because a lot of the in-game stuff just gives you the, if we bring up the F1 menu, it just gives you in here the R key for unload or refill. It doesn't give you an unload, so that's where the Coat Universal stuff comes into its own and shines there. So we do require something like that. I like the Coat Universal setup. It's really useful, and they've done a really great, fantastic job on the modding of them. Same as what they did within FS17 as well. So, excuse me. So we just press our I key, and we get our fuel dribble out all over the floor. Awesome. And we can also see there that our display is actually going up, so we know it's going into the unit. So we'll just leave that to do what it's going to do. So we'll switch the tractor off. And we'll come round and just have a look at our info panel again and just see whether we've actually got some fuel and things going in. Excellent. We've got 8,000 or 20% of our boards pallets. We've got, well, the fuel is still going up at the moment. Again, I don't know how much it takes, so might take quite a lot, might take all of it, might need more. Again, I'll let you experiment with that. What I will do is just speed up time just a little bit, and hopefully, there we go, fantastic, look at that. All kicking into gear, so I'll just slow down time again. So it is now actually kicking into gear. The fuel still continue to go in. So let's have a look up here. We've got our display there, 7,958 litres of boards pallets. So fantastic. So if we come out of here now, we'll go down to the other end. We'll just see what's happening. And we have our pallet spawning, our empty pallet spawning. Fantastic. So that's really great. That's all working as intended. So what I will do here is just speed up time again so we actually create our pallet a little bit quicker, just so we can see what we do actually get. What I will do actually is, if I use the fast forward mod, we'll just zip through time a little bit. Hopefully it won't mess things up too much, and we'll just see what we do actually get, because I want to get this moving on. Oh, look at that, and it does all the actual rollers work there and everything. It is actually moving our pallet down, so that's fantastic. With a nice sticker on there telling us what it is and everything, barcoded, all wrapped up, magical. Okay, so if we come out here, what I'm going to do is grab my skid steer again here, and we will then go and pick the pallet up, because what I want to see is in the panel, the info panel down my right hand side here, I want to see what it actually registers as when I pick it up on the pallet forks here. Will it show us wood chips, or will it show us as a wool pallet, or what will it show us? So let's just see what we get here. So I don't need that open, so let's lower these down again. Apologies for out of cab driving, I cannot do this in cab. So let's come into here, look at that, fantastic. So if we look in our info panel, it does actually show us the correct HUD as a pallet. So we've got 7,000 litres of pallet. I know, litres, I just don't understand how they, and it is really heavy. really heavy. Fantastic. Okay, so what I'm going to do here, I think, because I'm never going to lift that off the ground with that, so let's come out of here. What I will do is I'm going to buy a wheel loader, because if this won't lift it, then a tractor certainly won't. I'd be very surprised if it did. I know this is quite light, but going on front loaders, you know, with your tractor, I would imagine that the actual hydraulics just wouldn't be able to handle it, because this has got massive great hydraulic ram on it, which should be able to overcome your standard sort of front loader forks. So what I'll do is I'm actually going to go and get a wheel loader. So we'll get a JCB, that's fine, not worried about additional wheels. We'll get a pallet fork for that. Fantastic. So we'll jump out of this. Now I've set my store trigger up really close so I don't have to go halfway across the map to get what I need. So we'll start this up. Now I'm using my steering wheel at the moment, because obviously coming from Giant Editor it's just a pain to have to move all my keyboard out of the way just to get my steering wheel set up for this. So forgive the jerky when we move across all over the screen here, because it is a mid sort of axis vehicle. So we'll just come in here now. Hopefully this will lift it off the ground, otherwise we've got some problems. So we'll swing in here and hopefully not balls this up completely. Right, so let's lower our pallet fork down. We'll come in. We still get the same. That is really heavy. Even this is struggling. Wow. Yeah, even this is struggling quite a bit actually. Look at that, dipping right down at the front there. So that is really heavy. I don't know quite how they've set the actual weight of those up. Might have to adjust that slightly. Anyway, I'll leave you to play around with that and you can see what you can do with that. But I just wanted to have a look and see about getting the mod into the map and whatever else. So where we have it, we have the pallet creation, pallet works, pallet maker, whatever you want to call it, mod in the map. We have our pallets all set up. We have a new field type in the map using the additional map type script. That will probably go completely wrong now. Can I pick that up? No, too heavy. So I'd have to move that. Maybe I can pick that. Just out of curiosity, I want to see if the single pallet there is as heavy, if it calculates the weight just from the one pallet or a stack of pallets. So let's just see if we can lift this one single pallet with the skid loader, wheel skid, whatever you call this thing. Sorry about the croaky voice, I've got a really funny thing going on at the moment with a cold and oh dear. Weather doesn't know what to do at the moment. Right, let's come in here and just see what we get. So can we pick this one up on its own? Yes we can. Okay, so that's something. So it may be a case of, if all you have is a skid loader, or whatever you call, where is this thing? Yeah, skid steer, that's it. If all you have is a skid steer, then it may be beneficial to possibly pick them up before they get too big. I don't know. Seems a bit of a shame you have to stand there and watch them because you're limited on equipment, but it might be the case. Anyway, there we go. Can we get this kicked into gear again? Just one more time, see what we get. There we go. So it is working again. There we go. Fantastic. Unfortunately, I think with some of these, with the pallet spawn points, if you move whatever is spawned in on that particular point, even just a little bit, that's it. It won't continue its creation. You have to move it for it to then spawn another one in. I know from experience with the large lettuce greenhouses in FS17, if you just knocked it slightly on that pallet spawner, that was it. You were getting no more lettuces or cabbages or whatever else you had coming out of there. You had to move that pallet before you could start another one. Anyway, there we go. So it is in the map. We've set it all up, scripts and whatever else, moved some stuff around, played around. One thing I will actually just say before we go, I had to go back into Giants Editor and lower this down slightly, because placing it using the interactive tool, it looked great and everything. The doors looked like they were aligned to the floor. The actual wood chip bunker, or whatever you want to call it, down here looked aligned and everything else perfect, no problem. But when I actually got into the game and opened the doors, not specifically this end wasn't quite so bad, but up this end, the lip here to get into the building was so high that I just could not get my skid steer to go over it, even empty or full up. It just would not go over it. It was such a high lip there that it just wouldn't go in. So just be aware of that when you do import it into the map. It might be worth going into one of the doors here, selecting one of the doors in Giants Editor and temporarily moving it out of the way. If you know how to do that, swing it out of the way, so that you can get this at a correct height. Or it may be just a bit of experimentation going into a Giants Editor, moving it down a little bit further, then coming back into game, open the doors, seeing what it looks like, going back into Giants Editor, etc, etc. But just so you can be aware of that, this end again is not too bad. Or alternatively, you may need to raise the ground just in this area up slightly to meet the lip of the actual building, so you can get in and out without getting stuck on it. So there we go. Anyway, I'm going to end it here because I'm just going to jabber on for ages. Pallet creation, pallet work, thingamajiggamer, all in the map, all working, scripts and all the rest of it, new field types, fantastic. Thanks very much for watching, and I will catch you on the next one.